Start right where I left off with the iris, which is the colored ring of the muscle controlling the size of the pupil. The pupil is the name we give to that central opening or hole in the iris. The iris is the colored part of the eye, and it's colored because of the amounts of melanin that are located there. The more melanin, the darker the eye color. So like brown, black, or hazel would have a greater amount of melanin than blue, green, or gray colored eyes where the melanin is pretty scanty. The inner layer of the eye consists of the retina and the beginning of the optic nerve. We're going to talk about the optical components of the eye, the transparent elements that emit light rays, refract, which means to bend light rays, and focus images on the retina. They include the cornea, the aqueous humor, the lens, and the vitreous body. The cornea is the clear, transparent cover on the front surface of the eyeball that bends the light rays. Remember, it was a part of the fibrous tunic. The aqueous humor, which is also clear, is a fluid posterior to the cornea but anterior to the lens, and it's going to need to be reabsorbed by the scleral venous sinus. It's produced and reabsorbed at the same rate so that the pressure remains equal and nourishes the lens and the cornea. The lens is composed of flattened, tightly compressed, transparent cells that are enclosed in an elastic capsule. They are suspended behind the pupil by a ring of fibers called suspensory ligaments, which attach to the ciliary body. The lens functions to focus light. The lens can change the shape to help focus the light on the retina, and the lens can become rounded or flattened to focus on particular objects. The accommodation of the lens is the process of changing in the curvature of the lens that enables you to focus on nearby objects or distant objects. When focusing on near objects, your ciliary muscles contract, pulling the ciliary body anteriorly toward the pupil. That will cause the ligaments to get relaxed and loose, and the lens thickens. When you're focusing on distant object, the ciliary muscle relaxes, pulling the ciliary body away from the pupil. The ligaments become tight, and the lens stretches thin. Remember the vitreous body that's located behind the lens. It is actually a fluid, just like the aqueous humor, but instead of being clear liquid like water, it's more of a jelly, and it's only produced during gestation. There's no continual production, so there's no need for it to be drained off. The vitreous humor fills the large space between the lens and the retina called the vitreous chamber, and its job is to keep the retina pressed up against the choroid. The vitreous body keeps it against the choroid so that the retina does not pull away, which is what we call a detached retina and could cause blindness. Next, we're going to move into the neural components of the eye, the retina and the optic nerve. The retina is the cup-shaped outgrowth of the diencephalon, so technically a part of the brain. It is nervous tissue. It is a thin, transparent membrane attached to the eye at 2 points. There's the optic disc, where the optic nerve leaves the eye, and the ora serrata, which is that scalloped anterior edge of the retina. Kind of looks like a serrated or rounded serrated edge. So think about serrata, serrated, and scalloped, adjacent to the posterior margin of the ciliary body. Make sure you look in your book to find these two pieces. Vitreous body presses the retina smoothly against the rear of the eyeball, but if the retina does separate from the choroid, it will cause blurry areas in your field of vision, and if it's separated for too long, can lead to blindness. There's an instrument used by optometrists, the ophthalmoscope, and which illuminates and magnifies the retina so that they can see your macula lutea, your fovea centralis, and your optic disc. The macula lutea is known as the yellow body. It's located behind the center of the lens, and it's a patch of cells right on the visual axis of the eye. The fovea centralis is a tiny pit in the center of the macula lutea that contains only cones, which means it's going to produce our most detailed colored images. If you're looking in your visual analogy guide, this will look like the bullseye on the target. The optic disc is right in front of where the optic nerve exits, posterior surface of the eyeball. There are no receptor cells there, so no rods, no cones, so technically it's a blind spot. You can actually find your blind spot using the test illustration in your textbook on page 615, or roughly thereabout. Close one eye, stare at the X, and eventually the red dot disappears. The brain has to fill in the blind spot. It's called visual filling. And the brain sees only green on either side of the X, so it assumes the whole bar is green, fills in the blind spot area. The conversion of light energy into action potential occurs in the retina. There are photoreceptor cells, known as rods and cones, that will absorb light, generate that electrochemical impulse, and the optic nerve then carries that impulse to the primary visual cortex of the occipital lobe. We have two kinds of photoreceptors within our eye. There are rods, which respond to dim light, provides us with a black and white vision. Because rods respond to dim light, the stimulation of the rods is sometimes called night vision. It doesn't get us a very clear, sharp image. You'll notice if you wake up in the middle of the night and look in a room, you kind of see a general shape. Sometimes you think of what you see might be the shape of a person, and you flip your light on, and it's nothing like that at all. Because when you flip your light on, you stimulate your cones, and they're responsible for the clear, crisp day vision and color vision. So they give you the outline to show you, no, that's not a person, that's just a pile of clothes on the chair, and so you're relieved. Photoreceptors for color vision, or cones, so remember the C and the C, can absorb different wavelengths of light, which enable us to perceive different colors. There are two of the most common causes for blindness are cataracts and glaucoma. Cataracts are the clouding of the lens. It happens when the lens fibers darken with age, and fluid-filled bubbles and clefts filled with debris appear between the fibers of the lens. When that can be induced is by diabetes, smoking, alcohol, drugs, UV light, especially those with blue eyes. And think about, if they're blue eyes, little melanin to absorb that UV light so more gets through. Certain viruses can also cause cataracts. Cataracts cause your vision to appear milky, as if you're looking from behind a waterfall, and that's where the name came from. And they replace the natural lens with a plastic one. Because there's no blood vessels, they don't have to worry about blood typing or matching, and a natural one can be actually replaced with a plastic one. Glaucoma is a state of elevated pressure within the eye. Now, this elevated pressure is due to obstruction of the scleral venous sinus. Remember, where the aqueous humor is drained. So if it's not drained, it starts to build up, and next thing you know, you have an elevated pressure. That elevated pressure of the fluid and the buildup of the fluid puts pressure on the vitreous body. So the retina presses hard against the choroid, compressing the blood vessels. And without good blood supply, those retinal cells could die from lack of oxygen and nourishment. The symptoms of glaucoma are flashes of light, colored halos around the lights, which is what makes driving at night sometimes more difficult for people who suffer with glaucoma, because all the bright headlights and street lights cause that halo effect and makes it more difficult to see. Lost vision from glaucoma cannot be restored. That's why it's important to find and locate early so that proper medication can be administered. The intraocular pressure can be measured at an ophthalmologist through a tonometer. And that's the end of Competency 16. Good luck on Test 4 and your final exam.